Hello and welcome to Reanimated. This is a podcast about zombies and all things undead. I'm Stuart, host A or B, depending on the week. Joining me is H.A. Conrad, New York. What's up?
Nothing much. So wait, are we saying we're host alphas and betas? Because that would be pretty funny.
That would be appropriate today because, as H.A. has quickly alluded to, we are doing 10 this week, starting our recap of season 10 of Walking Dead. With 10A, 10B actually airs tomorrow night, and then once we catch up to that, this is unprecedented, people. Us reviewing or recapping the season of The Walking Dead Prime not as it's happening, but in the same year.
Yeah, no, I mean we've done Fear the Walking Dead,
We've done Fear,
but not The Walking Dead. We've spent some time getting there, so we're gonna play catch up. But I'm excited to talk about that with you. But we have a couple little news tidbits. It's been a little light lately, probably because coronavirus has taken over the news cycles, and it's a little too close to zombie plagues. I think. For people's comfort. I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading into that. But in any case, as everybody anticipated, the coronavirus is spreading, and it's gonna probably happen at some point where it's gonna spread across the U.S. And it makes sense.
That's likely?
Yeah, I do. I
feel like there's this threshold where once you get above 100 cases, then it starts to balloon. And we're not even close. And our rate of new infections has stayed pretty low consistently.
It stayed low, but I kind of still feel like there's some stuff out in the wild that nobody knows about. And
it certainly seems to be the case with the situations in South Korea and now Iran, where these are two countries where folks are getting kind of concerned. There was a World Health Organization press conference this week, or recently, where the dude was like, we really have to lock this down. There's a window to put this thing to bed, and it's getting smaller before it gets much, much bigger, which was kind of scary to read for me.
Yep. The other thing that was scary for me to read is when the U.S. evacuated the U.S. citizens from the Princess Plague boat, as I've been calling it. There were 14 people, apparently, that just before they got into the flights tested positive, and the protocol was supposed to be that they were supposed to basically not allow them on a flight, but they did anyway and put up a bunch of plastic sheeting.
Ah, yes.
But there were 300 other people that at that point had not tested positive, and they were understandably upset because they felt like they'd been pretty close to being exposed or exposed again.
I mean, they're breathing the same air.
Right. That's just not going to help. I don't care how much plastic sheeting you put up. So I just think, look, it's a virus, and I think that, I don't know, I think it's unlikely they're going to be able to contain it. The only thing I can think of, though, which has happened with other things, and it definitely happened with SARS, is that, it got to the point where it did sort of stop. But that said, this is much catchy. It's just much more, the rate of transmission is higher with this. I just think it's probably pretty hard to lock this down. And very sadly and scarily, there's been a lot of incidents of, racism and fear, in different areas because of this virus. I think I heard in Pakistan there was Ukraine.
Ukraine, there were freaking riots.
Yeah, there were riots, and I feel very badly for those people that were involved in that. And
the rioters?
No.
With the rioters.
No, I don't side with the rioters. I side with the people who they were basically making these assumptions about. And
what's curious is you look at there are no active cases in Ukraine based on our data map situation.
Yeah,
so
and this was merely because they were Asian in descent, and that was just this weird, it's a terrible thing. So anyway, I hope that thing doesn't continue, but we have seen reports of that, so hopefully, I mean, look, I hope they get it locked down. I just think unlikely. It's just the way the world works these days. So hopefully it stays where it is, but and I hope that everything continues to drop, but we'll have to just keep an eye on it.
Well, the top 5, if we're doing, I mean, that's a pretty crass way to do it, but the top 5 right now are China, followed by the Diamond Princess with 634 cases. I mean, China has 76,000.
Yep.
And then South Korea with 433 as of today. Then Japan with 122, which some of which might be cases that came from the cruise ship that they've just moved into their local hospitals. I know that's happened with some of those passengers. And then you
Yep.
go below 100 to Singapore with 85, and then Hong Kong with 69. And if those, I feel like those are some of the ones to watch, because then you have this like density of contagion that could. But I mean, Hong Kong and Singapore, I don't know. I want to say that they have this stuff on lock, because they are used to being a very densely packed together populace, and they have all the advantages of modern medicine. That's for sure.
Well, they do, but I mean, anyway. Well, so we'll keep an eye on this, but let's move on to other stuff, other more frivolous things.
Oh, dude, I just noticed that the U.S. actually has gone from 15 to 35. Those must be cases
Those are
that we've brought home.
Yeah, because at least 14 were from the other from the cruise ship. So
awesome.
yeah. So. Keeping an eye on this particular issue, and we will obviously be talking about this forever, or at least hopefully until it resolves.
Until it goes away. I don't know.
But in other news, the Walking Dead attraction at Universal Studios is closing to make way for the Secret Lives of Pets ride, I guess.
Yep. The two things are not related.
Okay.
So they say. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do you read into that? Do you see this as writing on the wall?
I don't. I think that this was probably just going to be I don't think they anticipated. They had said before that this wasn't going to be a forever attraction. And I think that, this is what they do. And look, maybe there is an appetite, or isn't an appetite for like super scary things. And they're a family friendly outfit. So I think they've been trending more towards things like Wizarding World of Harry Potter and that kind of thing. And my guess is there has to be a reason, and maybe lots of people weren't going into this and finding it too scary. Who knows? But, they can probably always bring it back if they really need to. And people have done that and dusted off different attractions. So it wouldn't shock me if this came back. And then lastly, I just found this funny thing, and only put this in here because of the some of the panels. But this is that like Kiss zombie like graphic novel, and it's basically a zombie adventure with the members of Kiss. And there's some zombie kills with guitars and things like that. But I just thought it would be kind of amusing to put this in there.
It is amusing. I don't know that I would read this.
Oh, I wouldn't read the graphic novel, no. But I just think it's interesting that it exists at all, and that people are taking it really seriously. And this whole like commentary on it is really funny.
Kiss
so anyway,
and merchandise have just really exploded.
Yeah,
and I think it has something to do with like an anniversary tour. But they're really pushing the envelope on their merch.
Yeah. So just put that in the show notes. But I'm excited to chat with you about the first 2 episodes of season 10 of The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And these 2 episodes, one is The Line We Crossed, directed by Greg Nicotero, written by Angela Kang. And then the second one, also directed by Greg Nicotero, but written by Nicole Moranti Matthews. And these both aired in the fall of 2019. And this is after it takes place, like, there's a bit of a time jump from the Winter Storm episode that we saw.
Right.
So this is basically kind of seeing what happens, and we know that the Whisperers have gone away for the winter months, I guess, to Florida. But this is, kind of seeing what the members of the different communities are doing. It's a very, you kind of see them all organized and in fighting ranks. Everybody in the community seem to be cooperating pretty well together. We get to see a bit of Oceanside.
Yeah. This first scene is the stuff that they were really hyping before the season began, with the shields and they're working together. They're like training.
Yep.
But honestly, I do have a couple of bones with this training montage. It's not a montage. It's like it's a for real scene. But most, like, they're really just showing like, this is what we can do. But they're fighting 3 zombies at a time, and there's at least 30 people out there, and you end up just being like, okay, you're never gonna go against the Whisperers with a group this large, and they're not gonna come at you with 3 people. There might be 3 Whisperers, but they'll have 40 zombies with them. And I guess maybe this was like the first time that they've drilled this way, but they also seem to have it down. So to me, it just felt like you could have made this a bigger set piece. Would have been my thing.
I felt like you could have made it a better set piece. And my other thought was that some of this training seems so involved as to potentially get in the way of actually, your goal, which is killing these things. I liked that people were regimented and seemed to be quite disciplined, but that, and I like some of the ideas of the things that they were showing, but to me, some of it didn't make sense because you're just not as nimble if you're holding up these big shields.
I think the shields are key, because you want to keep the enemy away from you, right? You want to keep the whole watch their hands thing. You want to keep those hands on the other side of those. Those shields are really nice. I like them. They're like Roman style with those spikes on them.
I'm not saying
you want to get this combat into othismos, like the Greek method of pushing each other back and forth, and I think that would give these guys a major advantage.
I think it would, but when you're watching them actually going into the fight, it's just, there's a little bit of I don't know. I just felt like it should have been a little less clunky. And I know that there's shields and stuff like that, but it just seemed like when things just sort of got out of control, suddenly it's like, oh my God. And
yeah, they break ranks when 10 zombies get out, they suddenly spread out. I didn't understand that.
Right. And you would think if they had been practicing this for so long, I don't know. So anyway, that was my only little gripe about that. Because
it was a showcase for everybody, right? Like every time another group came out, they would be like, all right, now the archers. Now we'll just go out and have Michonne do it the normal old-fashioned way, which is just go out in front of the shields and chop them all down with a sword. And I'm like, that shouldn't be a part of your new strategy, because that's the old way of doing things. That was my thought on that.
Yeah.
And then, the king and Jerry are just like mop boys in this scenario too. They're not really part of the process. It's part of, I think, an ongoing theme this season for the king, for Ezekiel, in that he has been kind of relegated.
Yeah. And he's feeling a little, you could definitely see there's still a close relationship with him and Jerry, but he definitely feels a little, he's not in the same spot he was before, obviously.
We have a few scenes of him this episode. Yeah, one where he's telling Jerry, I'm not your boss, man. Like, he's completely dropped all of that pretense. Jerry, of course, will never will, because he's Jerry.
Yeah.
And then there's the scene with Carol, which is
horrible.
Pretty rough, yeah.
Although, interestingly, I did like the idea, they show Carol, she's been kind of living on the boats and doing stuff with the Oceanside community. And, she talks about her life on the boat in a way that makes you think, why haven't more people just kind of figured out? They could, I know this is they could probably, well, a little bit, because it's like, you don't have to worry generally about the dead. You don't have to worry about things like the Whisperers out there. You have food. Hopefully if you found an island or something, you could be able to watch your back on that kind of thing. So that, even her describing the fact that, she's sleeping under the stars at night with no fear, and that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
But the interaction between her and Ezekiel when she comes in is like, oh man, poor Ezekiel. Like, she's like, oh, it's nice to see you. And then she goes and
gives hugs to other people.
Yeah, it's pretty rough, poor Ezekiel. But, I think there's some nice pieces in here with her and Daryl, and showing, they talk about running away to New Mexico together. You're seeing the aftermath of, basically, it's like you're seeing the aftermath of what happened with losing so many people that they cared about. And you basically are seeing sort of like what the grieving period. And that's definitely a little bit of what's going on with Carol, I think.
We're still feeling that, and they all feel gun shy, and they definitely are like whip dogs, and we felt that also in the Storm episode at the end of last season, where they were just like, whatever you do, don't anger the Whisperers. They're definitely they're the betas of this relationship between those two societies, and that continues here. Although they're doing their training, which makes you think, okay, they're not completely subservient. And when they find the mask, that's basically before the credits, I think they find the mask. And then it's like, oh no! And then there's all the, the chaotic communicating back and forth. And that's also when the satellite appears in the
Right.
sky.
But I will say, and just in terms of me and my sort of critiques of these kinds of things, they found the mask. The mask is like, okay, could have been there, could have been like it like washed in. It's not like there's no way
Yeah.
to determine when this happened. So their reactions to it, I mean, I think it does show how nervous they are about the
Mhm.
whispers, but I do think it's a tad overreactive, given that they haven't seen hide nor hair of these people for a while. And they're definitely, I mean, look, this is to establish sort of where we are in the story arc, where we are in the world, and I think that's fine. We still see Carol and Daryl strong, but interestingly, we see Daryl a lot more restrained about the whispers. Like he and Carol are in the woods tracking a deer that one of them had shot, and the deer starts to go into whisper territory, and Daryl's like, let it go. And
Yeah, and it's feet into the Whisperer territory. Yeah,
yeah,
and
but
she's pissed and not really backing down about how mad she is about it either.
yep, and he makes a comment that she's looking for Alpha, and she denies it. We all know that cannot be true. But so it's interesting just to sort of see where they are, like on a psychological level. We also have Aaron, who is really just basically like doing a lot of the philosophical questions, like, are we the bad guys?
Are we the baddies?
Yeah, and and he has this back and forth. We've had these conversations before. It just happens to be him raising it at this point, and he's clearly still suffering from the loss of Jesus more recently and the others that he was so close to.
Because when he talks about Eric being dead, I'm like, yeah, that was 2 seasons ago, man. Get with the now. You've got more current people to be mourning. Also, Eric died 6 years ago because there's been a time jump. I mean, not to say that you can't still mourn somebody 6 years later, but in this world where people die nonstop and you just lost 12 of your best friends at the end of the last season, I think. But I like the fact that he's like, no more Mr. Nice Aaron, because he has been this like nice guy, maybe too long, but he's also been taking care of business. I don't see why he has anything to be worried about.
Yeah, I mean, he's very much like the Dale voice, I think, a lot of the time, and so seeing this side of him is different. And I like it, honestly. I think that it's a good thing to have him sort of be in this role. I like seeing all the communities working together. I like seeing the new dynamics, and that's kind of cool. And then, in terms of like the fear of the Alpha and the Whisperers, I don't know. So there's, as you know, like one of the things that I still with the Whisperers don't really always fully understand. It's like, I don't know why they would come back to this area. If they're just sort of this wandering tribe of people that walk with the dead, why would they even care to come back to this place? It seems a little weird to me.
Maybe they just migrate with where it's like literally like bison or something, where it's just cooler up north by Virginia.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like it doesn't make it would make more sense if there was sort of like is it easier to forage in this area or something? But even so, why would they especially and even more so after I watched these 2 episodes where sort of they're establishing the beginnings of the Whisperers and that whole philosophy / cult. Their philosophies are very like, okay, the whole world's dead. We're part of the, we're going to walk with them. We're going to like just kind of do what they do. That sort of implies that there wouldn't be necessarily a plan. And I don't know. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of like, to me, enough of an argument for them to be sort of coming back to protect this territory.
Yeah. The problem with them as a group is they're basically inscrutable. We don't understand their motives. Neither do our heroes. But that does, as you say, raise some questions that we're like, but why though? And we don't have any answers for that. So it's a little bit frustrating. But that's also part of why the good guy, the baddies guys are so scared of them, is they can't figure them out. They're like, where did they go? And are they coming back? And then when they do their little search mission and ride off into the woods and find some really old bodies and old skins, they're like, is this a sign? And it's like, that looks like really old, like months, if not years.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's like, okay, well, this is not clear. The camp, that camp in particular that they found was like pretty much, that was old. Like there's no active, and they there's no active Whisperer community there clearly, but they're all like really nervous about it. And I do get it. Like, look, losing that many people in the way they lost them was terrible and shocking and traumatic. And clearly there's members of their community like Sadiq who are still dealing with that and having PTSD. And we're seeing like a much more cautious, way of life with them, and they are looking to protect their community and protect their people. And I think, any community would feel this way if you had people snatched out of it. Interestingly, we also have some interactions between Negan, Negan sort of doing his thing, but he's now allowed a little bit more freedom, and we see that, but he's making these comments like, I'm kind of keeping my head down because I don't want to be viewed as the enemy again.
Yeah, and Lydia is not so lucky because she's also not as smart as Negan, and she's gonna stay out and be angry like a teenager.
Yep.
Yeah, and then so the second half of this episode is really the satellite set piece. So it's a pretty busy episode, frankly, because it also tells all these stories from like three perspectives. But so the satellite appears for each of the groups that we're following. And then Eugene apparently just knows right away where it's going to land and that it's going to be a thing because he starts sprinting. But okay, fine. But they put out the fire, which is on the Whisperer's side of the border. This is a very familiar scene to me. They're wearing like backpack extinguishers.
I was going to say.
They're cutting back. They're cutting like, what are they called? They're doing backfires and they're doing fuel breaks, and they're doing all of the things, plus fighting zombies. So that's a fun extra tip. The one part of this I don't understand is this is a Russian-Soviet satellite, and Eugene is like, we got to get in there and get the technology. And I'm like, this is from the country that used pencils in space rather than spend gazillions of dollars like NASA did on a pen that could write in zero-G. Like, these are not high-tech loving spacefarers, so I don't know what he's going to get out of a 50-year-old satellite.
Well, I mean electronics, things that are maybe working that you don't have. I mean, I agree with you. I thought the same thing, but you never know. And I guess it's not like they have access to stuff like this, and it's just Eugene, so it's not shocking that he would be excited about this.
No, I suppose not.
I do think like some of the effects in this with the fire zombies was pretty cool. Daryl getting in that tree, destroying them, that was pretty cool.
I mean, but at the cost of an axe, there's 3 zombies. You couldn't just whatever.
Yeah, agreed.
How hard is it to make axes? Probably harder than it is to kill 3 zombies for Daryl. That's all.
Right. And then,
but this was like just full of great stunts, like actual people on fire, trees falling, a whole set that's on fire, lots of people running around. This must have been really complicated to shoot. And I think that it looks good. It's like a very good looking episode in terms of the set pieces from the beginning through this scene. Looks good, I would say.
Yeah, it looks great. And I think, showing that they have to worry about things. So in addition to walkers, they have to worry about fires and what that means. And the fact that the walkers are going to be attracted to both the noise of the satellite going down, but also the fire, because pretty lights, I guess. But that now it's like not only do you have this fire to fight, but you also have to worry about the walkers at the same time. And so, and they also become their own little fire spreaders if they catch on fire. So there's so I kind of liked the idea of that. That was kind of a cool thing to show. And then at the end of this, they do establish that the Whispers are back. We see this weird little scene between Alpha and Carol. Carol's up on that high rock. She sees Alpha doing a weird thing. I don't know what she's doing. Her weird little sniffing of the air thing, and and then there's like a look between them where it's like, oh, it's on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would be a better scene if it wasn't relying so much on this green screen valley where they had shown apparently the horde to Daryl in the end of last season.
Yeah.
If only they could have found a way to not green screen that, because it does just look like 2 people standing on sets looking vaguely in the direction that the other person is supposed to be. And they repeat this scene at the end of the next episode, and I'm just like, I don't like either of them. They're not. Yep. These aren't good. This is clearly. I mean, whatever. I should just let that go. But it does detract from it. I feel like this show has never really nailed these big kind of like panoramas they try to do with green screen, and I feel like they just don't work. And so This would have been better if they had just run into each other or seen one another across an actual field.
Yep, I agree. But I think they're also trying to show how big the world is to some extent. But I agree with you. I think it doesn't look good, and it looks kind of cheesy. So we got that. Jumping into the next episode, which is we are at the end of the world, and this explores a lot of the beginnings of the Whisperers. And we saw a little bit of this with Lydia's flashbacks when her character was first introduced. Though obviously she's an unreliable narrator because she doesn't remember a lot.
Right.
But seeing this, you can kind of understand why. There is definitely like the cold open. It's pretty rough. We see a woman that's like unconscious, but her car horn is going off. And she really, I mean, this scene is pretty brutal, and deliberately so, I suspect, to make it realistic and explain, Lydia's
the
what,
nose shot
yeah,
was a bit
it's
much.
rough. So the walkers come and grab her out of her car, or when she's near her car, and they just tear her apart. And 9 or 10-year-old Lydia is really traumatized and screams, understandably, because what kid wouldn't? She and her mom are dressed up in, they figured out the guts thing that Glenn figured out so early on in the whole series, and to escape they run into this building. Her mom, we see Alpha is always seems to be kind of the same. She is badass, and she is protective of Lydia, but she's also pretty rough on her because she's like, you almost got us killed, and she does not have a lot of mercy, and she's definitely not warm and fuzzy. And they end up in this insane asylum, or like a mental hospital, I guess, where they come across this really weird dude. And I have to tell you, when they first show Beta, he is just, I don't know. There's like a moment and a pause, and he's like at the end of the hallway, looking like some kind of like just 70s horror monster, right?
Oh yeah. And Lydia's like, is he a monster? Yeah. Alpha's like, oh, we're all monsters, but I'm like, no, but he's more of a monster.
He's a little bit more of a monster. He's quite strange. And he's clearly, he is territorial. He basically gives them an okay for them to stay one night, and Alpha is like, she gives this whole speech about how if he's going to kill them, he'll have to kill her daughter because she's not leaving this world without her.
Good acting by the child actor in that scene, too, because she's at first she's just looking at her mom like, oh, I love you, Mom. And then she says that, and she kind of looks off like down the hallway like, oh, wow, okay. Didn't realize that was the stakes here.
Yep. And it's,
So we go back and forth between, like, I guess current what's happening with the Whisperers and these scenes in the mental hospital and the origin of Alpha and Beta, and I think I'd much prefer the scenes with that introduce Thora Birch's character Gamma for this episode. It's not like the other stuff is bad; it's all useful, but it does feel a little bit fillery. It goes on a little too long, I think, would be my critique.
Yeah, I think my critique of it, I have a couple. One is that, yes, I agree with you. I don't think you needed to go back so many times to show the establishment of the relationship between these two characters, mainly because you've established their strong bond throughout, like, from the beginning. You've seen how close they are. I don't think you need to get into the backstory as much as they did to show that. I also think that... And, I'll be honest with you, knowing more of the backstory, it did make me wonder how they even manage to get a following, because both of them are really antisocial.
Oh, God, yeah. This has always been the question. Like, how do they have followers when Alpha's straight up murdering her own people?
Right. And that's my thing, is that I felt like if they had left that slightly more of a mystery, maybe we could believe a little bit. There's some plausibility of them gathering this group around them. I do think they're trying to sort of lead into a storyline that they prey a little bit upon the mentally ill and scared and weak people, because they're going to fall in line with their belief system without question. And we do see some of those dynamics with the sisters and Thora Birch's character, or her sister's character, rather. And it turns out that Gamma's sister is the woman who had to sacrifice her baby in that first standoff between the Whisperers and was it
At
Alexandria?
Hilltop.
No,
It was at
Hilltop.
Hilltop, yeah.
And we have talked about this before, and it seemed to be a little bit crazy that they were doing this. And as it turns out, this was something that Alpha devised to basically be shocking, I think. And one thing that did strike me is just how young the girl was, the mother of the little baby. And you see these dynamics in this community with these very there are things that can turn the community really quickly. You have to have them all buy in unquestioningly to Alpha and Beta's way of life.
And Alpha and Beta have constant ongoing conversations in this episode about, like, we're too far away from the enemy, they're going to stop fearing us. And then the other side of it is, and our own people
right.
Are like too tempted by the way of life that we have spurned. And so and they do a really good job of, after she like pardons the sister for the crime of crying in a field.
Yeah.
After that first pardon, another female whisperer comes up to her and goes, "I think about that place all the time too," which I'm like, that is a death sentence to say that stuff out loud. Gamma obviously sees that and just drags her sister away as soon as that woman says that, and then everybody kind of just looks down and walks away. But there's dissension in the ranks, which is going to be ultimately the undoing of the Whisperers, I assume. This is kind of the thread that they've kept pulling on ever since since last season. So they've kept that out there as a thing that we can kind of be like, okay, we got some hopes for the Whisperers all falling apart on their own.
Right.
So that's out there.
That's out there. And then, I think that the one thing I did like about this episode is they show how tenuous that belief is and how much they have to do to keep it in line. And you do have things like, and Gamma gets her name Gamma because she basically protects Alpha versus protecting her sister, when her sister just goes crazy. But there's also this whole thing where it finally comes to light that Lydia is still alive. Beta has kind of, that he's been suspecting something like this based upon Alpha's behavior and her mercy toward the woman with her child. And so that's an interesting interaction.
I'd forgotten that Beta knew by the beginning of this season that Lydia was still alive. However, what we know is that Gamma is under the impression that that Alpha murdered Lydia, and that was her showing her purity and her strength, because that's her pep talk to the younger sister also during this episode, is like, there's no pure form of or honest, like, purity. I don't know if she talks funny, other than killing your own flesh and blood. I was like, wow, that is messed up. But that's her pitch to the younger sister for, like, leaving her baby at Hilltop. But so Thora Birch's character thinks that she's also done the same thing with her own daughter. This is, like, I think another one of these major threads, that if everybody figures out that Alpha's been lying to them and had not murdered her own daughter, there will be a mutiny. I think that is
right. And I mean, Beta's scared of that. Beta is very scared of that. And
yeah, it's funny, isn't it, that he's so concerned about the community, like you said, he is such an antisocial psychopath.
Yeah,
but he also has these moments, these scenes in the last season where he's, like, comforting the guy who's about to die and being like, "You're going to be one of us forever now." And, like, he is he's got layers, I guess.
Yeah. But anyway, it's fine. I guess it's fine that they showed some of this, but I do think they would have done better to leave some of this to be a slight amount of a mystery. And I think, but it does at least give us a little bit more background into some of the reasons why they do the things that they do. But I will say that even when, I think it's stupid for the Whisperer to have even said anything like she did in front, anywhere in ear distance of anybody, hearing of anybody.
Hear that. Yeah, you're right. That's suicide right there.
But I do think that just even based upon that, like, if you are in this crazy group of people and you see this community that's thriving and they have, crops and livestock and they're, not dressed in Whisperer skins, I just don't think that they'd be able to hold this group together like they have been. I think you would maybe not have direct rebellion, but you might have people sneaking off trying to join those communities if they could. But it makes it even more like this is part of why Lydia being alive is such a big deal. So
it does seem like Whisperers could just sneak off and desert. Yeah, and that's a good point, and it is curious why that hasn't happened, because they don't have walls. And any of the shots that we have of Whisperers in their camps, they're always just kind of ambling around. Some of them are doing skinning jobs or whatever, but a lot of them are just kind of wandering. And
right.
Why couldn't they just wander away? Because there's no gate that they have to go through.
Right. So anyway, that was just my thought watching these episodes. And then we also see the overlap. And you know, like Alpha and Beta have a standoff about the Lydia thing, and then Alpha basically, you know, to prove how loyal she is to their way of life, destroys the whole little altar or shrine she's got going on that Beta has discovered. And to show her loyalty, I felt like he might still be a little bit more skeptical, but you know, we'll have to see. And then we also see the satellite crash, and this crash is actually what kind of brings them back to investigate what happened, because this is on the border of their quote-unquote territory.
I think they were already on their way, but she also talks about we're going back. So it's a little bit confusing, because they were were ushering this large herd. The satellite really starts to spread the herd out, and it's actually Little Sister's insane attack and then subsequent death that keeps the herd in one place. So she actually helps them out a lot by doing that. Right. But yeah, so the end result is that they go back to confront again our trio or trio now. There's no more kingdom of communities. And then we have another green screen shot of Carol and Alpha staring at each other across a CGI gorge. It might actually be a CGI Carol and a CGI Alpha staring at one another across the CGI gorge.
It's not
it's not their best work. And no. This is another, you know, they started setting this up when Lydia was in the jail cell talking to Henry, and Henry's like, my mom's a tough lady, and Lydia's like, my mom's a tough lady, and we're like, oh, okay, here we go. So and now there they are looking at one another, and Carol's gonna Carol.
Yep. One of the aspects I did like of this episode was to see how the Whisperers gather the herd and control them, and that was kind of a cool thing to see. How they were like, okay, we're gonna get them out of, and you know, so that just seeing a little bit of what they're doing. Again, it's a little, the question of why is still there in big letters in my head, but you know, at least we're seeing a little bit of their way of life.
And this is part of their nuclear bomb that Michonne talks about in the last episode, which I thought was a refreshing, like speaking in plain terms that the show sometimes gets away from too easily with their dialogue. But all of the scene between her and Aaron, like we already talked about it, but he's like, are we the baddies? And I'm just tired of being the Mr. Nice Guy. And then he like goes off and does something dangerous. And she's like, hey, don't be dumb. You got to be smart, because they have a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. And their nuclear weapon is the fact that they can corral this many undead. And this is part of what I assume this is why they're collecting undead in this second episode of the season. Yeah.
So I'm excited though to talk about the rest of the season with you. And
are you just watching this fresh? Is this the first time you're watching these episodes?
No. I feel like I watched the majority of them, but I am rewatching them for our discussion because there's just too much detail to remember.
There's a lot going on. True.
And also, as you know, I tend to like in my head I'll skip ahead to different things that have happened, and I don't. So it's easier for me to view these and then talk about them fresh with you. Versus trying to totally recall what happened in each episode. So, you know.
One final note on these episodes. What do you think of Rosita's new, I don't know, like yoga instructor in mourning outfit that she's been wearing?
Yeah, that's interesting. Or kickboxing instructor. I don't know. It's and also, we forgot to talk about the whole little raising of Rosita's baby.
Coco.
Their whole little enclave there. So we've got Sadiq and Eugene and Gabriel and Rosita, and it just seems like they're all kind of communally raising this kid, which is kind of funny.
It is pretty funny.
So I kind of like that. I think that's a cute thing, and it's a nice thing to just show that, weird as it is, seems to work for them. So, so that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And there was also the very weird interaction between Sadiq and, they are showing that he has PTSD from the Whisperer, like the horrible standoff where he was left alive. But that doctor, the other doctor, that whole interaction
Dante
was very strange.
Yeah, and I think it's supposed to be, like I remember when I first watched that scene that I was like, is this guy a jerk?
Yeah.
He's always making jokes. But
No, well,
am I supposed to feel like he's a jerk because of the way that Sadiq is responding to him, and
right,
etc.
I only bring this up because it is sort of like this intro to this. He's a little bit of his character. This is sort of this.
It's a big deal. His character is a big deal.
It is. So I bring that up because we should touch upon that, given that particular. Yeah. So.
But yeah, and so it'll be interesting looking at these scenes between the two of those characters going forward. Like,
right.
How many of those scenes lead immediately to PTSD episodes for Sadiq, etc.? So it's an interesting new development, and Dante makes this joke that we've kind of always made, like that doctors are gods. Usually the joke is doctors always die on this show, but yeah, he's not wrong that doctors are like these extremely valuable members of the community also. But as we've seen in our following of Rick's group, they never last very long, even if they're just med students who've been reading a lot of books.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's the end of those 2 episodes. I also wanted to mention that I finally finished, admittedly with some snoozing, my book on tape of Typhoon, Robert Kirkman's The Walking Dead Typhoon by Wesley Chu, which is the story set in China of from The Walking Dead. And so it was extremely interesting. There's a lot of Chinese in the Audible version because their word for walkers is Zhongshu. I don't know what that translates to. Probably biters or something. And but it was a good story, heartbreaking with a little bit of hope thrown in, just so that you don't like give up on the book altogether. But an interesting story. I kind of hope that they make that into one of their little movie deals or limited season series. It'll be cool. And I've since bought another Walking Dead novel, so I'm working my way through them.
Cool. Well, I might have to catch up with you on that. I have not done that, so I have a hard time with books on tape because I inevitably fall asleep no matter what it is.
Yeah, me too. I mean,
it's
I'm
really hard
that.
for me.
So you don't have to. They're not only on tape. I think you can buy the Kindle or print version also.
All right. Well, maybe I will try that out. But good to hear your review of it. And next time we're going to be talking about episodes 3 and 4. So I'm looking forward to rewatching those. And let us know what you think. If you are watching this season or plan to rewatch it with us, we'd love to hear what your thoughts are. reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, reanimatedpcast on the Twitters, and you can also just leave a note on our page, which is reanimatedpodcast.com. And we're looking forward to hearing what your thoughts are, and we appreciate you listening.
Yeah. Awesome. So thanks for listening, and bye-bye.
Bye. Ciao.